of Uganda only a few weeks after he exited that office. The Judicial Service Commission had proposed 2 names from which the president was advised to pick the next Chief Justice. But reports now indicate that he prefers that Odoki holds office for an extra 2 years, a move that he says helps the country to maximize on its human resource. The opposition has joined the Uganda Law Society to protest against this decision. Although the Constitution, through Articles 142 Section C and 142 Part 3, provides that the President, with advice from the Judicial Service Commission, may appoint a qualified person as a Justice of the Supreme Court, even when that person has attained the retirement age for that office. Now, reports from Swaziland indicate that Justice Odoki has already been appointed to serve in that country's Supreme Court. And many are also wondering what that means now that is being reconsidered back home here. This development comes on the heels of another touchy matter involving the appointment of a serving UPDF military officer, General Ronda Nyakairima, as a minister. General Nyakairima was duly sworn in as Minister for Internal Affairs by the President yesterday, with the opposition in Parliament moving to challenge this in the Constitutional Court. Now, these 2 issues have caused debate within the political and legal fraternity, with many suggesting that the Ugandan government is reversing the constitutional gains by eliminating major safeguards which would entrench the rule of law. So tonight we continue to look at the subject of constitutionalism by analyzing these 2 issues that are at the center of debate today. Our guests tonight, Honorable Betty Kamya, President of the Uganda Federal Alliance. You're most welcome, Honorable Betty Kamya.
Well, thank you, Edmund, and good evening, listeners.
We're also joined by Mr. Bosinje Kabumba, a lecturer at the Law School of Makerere University. You're most welcome, Mr. Kabumba.
Thank you, Edmund. Good evening, listeners.
We expect to be joined by Mr. Frank Kandiho, an NRM supporter who is also that political party's lawyer. Mr. Kabumba, why did President Museveni reappoint Odoki as Chief Justice?
Edmund, that's anyone's guess. I honestly have no idea why that is the case, especially since there are a number of qualified lawyers who meet the test under Article 143 who could have filled that position. And even if the argument was that the president was looking for someone whose judicial philosophy was in accord with his own, it takes a stretch of imagination to believe that among the very many qualified lawyers who appear to agree with the president's philosophy, there was no one among those who could be chosen. So it's really a very difficult question to even speculate about.
What does the law say?
The Constitution is very clear on this point. Article 144 of the Constitution says that when a judicial officer, in the particular case of the Chief Justice, attains the age of 70 years, they shall vacate that office. It doesn't say they may, they shall vacate. There's a difference in language, because it says under Article 144.1 that when you attain the age of 60 years, you may retire. So there's a specific distinction in that language. When you attain 60, you may retire. But it says when you reach 70 years, you shall vacate. Now,
it's mandatory.
It's mandatory. Now, there's a provision in there under 144 where it allows you 3 months to continue to handle any pending cases. But then it says that that period will not exceed 3 months. So even that period of 3 months envisaged under the Constitution is specific and limited in duration. And the only other mechanism where some arguments have been made regarding reappointment of one acting justice of Supreme Court are precisely that under 142, Article 142, 2A, there is a provision where the President can, with the advice of the Judicial Service Commission, appoint a justice of the Supreme Court, not a Chief Justice,
yes,
but appoint a justice of the Supreme Court to act in a particular capacity for a particular time, or until such time as he revokes it. So, on the clear language of 142 and 144, there is no power in the Constitution to appoint or to retain a Chief Justice who has attained the age of 70 years. Simply no power.
Well, but the same Constitution says to be Chief Justice, you must be a judge of the Supreme Court. So President Museveni is putting 2 ladders together to get the height that he wants.
The problem with that is that you begin with the prohibition under Article 144. The prohibition under Article 144 is that you reach that age, you get off.
You go home, yes.
And then the only power that allows you to be reappointed is specific power that only allows you to be reappointed as a justice of the Supreme Court. Now, if the framers of the Constitution had intended that the Chief Justice was, to use a phrase, reappointable, they would have said so, but they kept it silent. And in regard to such a very important office, an office which is fourth in precedence under Article 98(2), the Chief Justice is number 4. Surely, regarding such a particular office, the framers could not have left it to imagination or to some sort of the grey area here should be strictly scrutinized in favor of the intention of the framers not to allow that power.
What does this mean for Constitution? I mean, we're looking at a scenario where gaps are being sought all the time to fit a certain thinking. Arunda Nyakarima was made minister the other day, despite what the Constitution says in explicit terms. They say there are many gaps, but I mean, any document is going to have gaps. Now we're looking for lacunas to get our way in a certain place. What does this mean for the whip in the country?
Precisely. Even the best written Constitution would have certain areas where, you could have 2 or 3 interpretations, even if those interpretations are really strained. Even if they're really strained, but you have, where there are 2 lawyers, you can always find people arguing in court. Otherwise, you not have 2 lawyers arguing with equal fervor in court. So, and that's why it's extremely important as a country for us to look not just to the text of the Constitution, but to also the spirit of the Constitution. The very first line in our Constitution, the preamble, says, "We, the people of Uganda,
given to us,
recalling our history, which has been characterized by political and constitutional instability." Political and constitutional make this Constitution. So that Constitution arose out of a particular understanding of a checkered and problematic history and context. Now, so the spirit of this Constitution is really to avoid political and constitutional instability. And the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court have made it clear on a number of occasions that the Constitution has to be read as a whole in accordance with the spirit and purpose of the entire document. Therefore, for me, it's very problematic to find certain provisions being interpreted in a way that really go against the grain of that spirit. And I recall the words of a very famous professor in Kenya, now deceased Professor Okoth Ogendo, who said that the problem in Africa is that we've had constitutions without constitutionalism. That you have documents. Zimbabwe are just first a very wonderful constitution, one of the best in the world. But of course, as we all know, it just remains to be seen. I mean, you can just wait and see how it's going to be trampled upon. But more
how it's going to be trampled upon.
Exactly.
In Africa, read these documents and
we have excellent language. Really, the 1995 Constitution was a document of immense promise. But those who have been the guardians of it have really torn it to shreds. And it's really saddening, therefore, that one of the fathers, really, of the Constitution, Chief Justice Odoki, then stands in a position where he taints not only his legacy, but by extension, the tradition of constitutionalism in Uganda, which is already problematic. I just give you an example. A country like Botswana has a post-independence constitution, 1966 one, which is very similar to our 1962 constitution and very similar to a number of, independence era constitutions. Very problematic. But the practice of rule of law, of constitutional governance in that country, far exceeds their text. So I really think more important than the document we have is the culture of respect for the Constitution. And I think as long as that is lacking, you can amend, you can get wonderful language, but without that innate understanding of rules and respect for rules and the spirit of the Constitution, we're headed down a very bad path.
And of course, some people think it's really merely a piece of paper. One person during the presidential campaign said, well, the vote is only a mere piece of paper anyway. Yes. So again, it comes to the mindset. We have just been joined by Mr. Frank Kandiho. Our third guest is a member of the NRM party and a lawyer for that very party. You're most welcome, Mr. Kandiho.
Thank you very much.
Does what this man say is true? You people are tearing apart this very constitution that you spent a lot of money to put together. Why are you doing that? You want to take us back to the old days?
In what context?
Well, he said you're abusing the spirit of the Constitution.
In what context?
You are appointing the Chief Justice. The Constitution doesn't say you shouldn't do that.
Thank you very much. Then you have put the question now in context and you have enabled me the platform to answer. One, it is not the preserve of the party to appoint the Chief Justice. So the appointment of a Chief Justice is not within the purview of any political party. The appointment of a Chief Justice, as far as I know it, lies within the purview of the head of state on the advice of Judicial Service Commission and with the approval of Parliament. So it is this very government that put in place the mechanism of ushering in a Chief Justice. The question would be, is this appointment tenable? And And in my view, I can respectfully say it is not.
The reappointment of the Chief Justice is not tenure.
Forget about the reappointment. There is nothing to. There is nobody to reappoint. His tenure ended. His three months extension ended. He is not qualified to be a Chief Justice.
Honorable Betika,
and I am saying this. You see, I need us to differentiate between our professional clothing and sometimes our employment clothing, and sometimes our party lineage. I am saying this within the framework of my professional attire.
Yeah, things that shock you these days. You can't really be sure what's coming next. Honorable Betika, what's your view? Justice Odoki could be Chief Justice for two countries.
You know,
why do you think he's being reappointed?
I think what is surprising is that we are surprised. That is what I find surprising. And that we are even discussing this matter as if
I'm telling you,
it is a big surprise, because it's just one of numerous.
Are you an NRM supporter? You just heard shocking things.
No. You see, you need not be shocked, my brother. In addition to being an NRM supporter, I represent the NRM in different courts of law. I believe in the NRM, but you see, the point we need to put across is genuine advice. If we must live in a country where you and I are partners, where you and I are citizens of equal footing, I must say that I am reading from the same book, just like my brother, the Don from Makerere University, is reading from, just like the learned president of Uganda Federal Alliance is reading from. So I cannot, on the one hand, purport to read from the Quran and read from the Bible and purport to be a Christian.
I think you need to catch your breath. You just said some very heavy words. Why are we saying this kind of thing?
I was just saying that what is surprising is that we are surprised, because this matter is one of numerous controversies that this country sees almost on a monthly basis. On a monthly basis, we are served with a menu or a meal which includes, call it a dessert or a starter. On a monthly basis, we are served a meal which includes a serious controversy right through the 27 years. If you want me to remind you a bit, in 1989 there was the extension of the mandate of the NRA/M beyond the 4 original years. Then we've had the federal debate going on, controversy going on for a long time. You had the Land Amendment Bill, you had the sale of UCB and other public enterprises, you had the recall of Parliament to discuss the death of Honorable Neva and I, you have Bijimana, Babazi, Nantaba, Ronda, lifting of term limits, state house budgets, everything we call a controversy in this country. What makes it as a controversy is when the president's overbearing interests are pitted against either the constitution or popular view. Before the president's interests become intense, institutions are sober and they debate things and work almost soberly until the president has a different view. Then that pits his view against the view of the constitution or of the public, and that makes it a controversy of which we have been fed every month. But what should have surprised us at the beginning and not now is that he has won, his side or his view has won every contest since then, and you can name them, off your fingers like this. So I think what we should be maybe discussing is what Honorable Counsel said. Do we have a good constitution? Do we have a good vehicle? Because we know where we want to go. We know our destination. Like the Council said, we want a peaceful, progressive, democratic country. But we need a vehicle that will take us there. And that vehicle which we bought or which we designed is the Constitution of Uganda. It is the vehicle which is supposed to deliver us to a peaceful, democratic country. And it's even stated in this Constitution. Now, if we've been struggling for the past 50 years, but we're not getting anywhere near our destination, surely we must investigate certain things. Is the vehicle right? I don't even agree with the council that we have one of the best constitutions in this country, and I think that's what I've been saying almost every time I come here. We have a constitution that makes a president larger than life, almost larger than any institution in this country, because of the way that the constitution was designed. I agree that the spirit of the constitution was fantastic. It was to make us forget the past, but the design flawed. There's a serious flaw. The spirit, but there's a serious flaw in the design, and that design is the one which gives the president so much clout that what we are faced with actually is somebody who does not fear a punishment. You know, normally most politicians will fear to lose the next election, and that's what guides them to do what they have to do, because they are mindful of popular view and public discontent. But when you are not fearing those things,
yeah, but the president is elected every 5 years.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's elected every 5 years because it is designed
He should be afraid of being rejected.
No, he cannot be with this constitution. Even me, Betty, can you give me this constitution?
What do you mean? The constitution is on the
You give me this constitution, you cannot defeat me.
What do you mean?
Even if I'm not the president, and you said, Betty, come here, you are the one who elects the Electoral Commission, you are the one who elects the Chief Justice and the judges and the justices, you are the one who will constitute the courts of appeal or Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court, you are the one who will appoint the Minister of Finance, Governor of Bank of Uganda, Commissioner General of URA, Secretary of the Treasury, you are the one who will appoint the Inspector General of Police, you are the one who will appoint the Attorney General and the IGG and the whatever. You cannot defeat me.
You're already running out of breath and
you cannot defeat me. So if you give somebody to be head of state and head of government, the two institutions in a good constitution should be separated. That's why most countries, they have a head of state and a head of government. But here, let me finish this point. No, that's just the two. Here, government, the state and the ruling party are all fused into one entity. The government, the state, and the ruling party.
A certain man said,
are all fused.
He spoke in French. He said, "Let us
exactly."
And until that is not the case here. Ours is a very different.
That is the case, and until we disentangle this fusion, no matter who goes to State House, we are going to have this problem. We must disentangle government, state, and the political party in power.
Mr. Kabumba, can Justice Odogi, he was the framer, well, he led the Constitutional Commission that went around the country gathering views. There were other people, Professor Sempeba, Kalika Ihura, Miriam Matembe, and the others. Can he be Chief Justice of two countries? He's just been appointed the Justice of the Supreme Court in Botswana, so he's going to need a private charter to run the two countries. Swaziland.
Well, that by itself, without knowing the terms of his contract,
not buy him a jet. Very strong.
It could be that his duties are exercised on Saturdays. For instance, one doesn't know the particular design in those particular countries. So, theoretically speaking, it might be possible, especially if there is a particular understanding between the countries. I don't see much in the law that would prohibit that. But if it's a full-time appointment both sides, then there's a problem. But just to,
if there is.
If there is, then of course he has to choose. He has to pick and choose one of the two. You know, of course that's assuming that he goes down this path of taking this poison chalice.
Another country might give him the same job. A third country. This is Africa, or even a fourth one.
It will be extremely problematic for him to have those two options. But just to quickly take on from the point made by Honorable Betty Kamia in terms of constitutional design, I think you could talk about problems with the Constitution, but I also think that by and large, there's something when you say that someone is a president. I think there's something to be said for that position. And I think by itself, the power given the president is not necessarily nefarious. I don't think there's by itself something problematic with the president being allowed to appoint the Chief Justice, for instance, or Justice or Central Bank Governor. I think that is, it follows from the trust that people have put into the president, assuming that elections have been conducted fairly, assuming that the pause will has been exercised. I think it's actually important to have one public official who derives his mandate directly from a very large mass of people and who can transfer then that legitimacy to particular offices. I'll just give you the example, say, of a Chief Justice. And throughout the world, you find that the power to appoint a Chief Justice or just of the Supreme Court or the highest courts are really given the president, because otherwise you have a democratic deficit in one branch. Because the question would be, for instance, who would be best suited to appoint the Chief Justice? And the idea is either you put them up for election,
or you could have a Judicial Service Commission.
But those are you have an unelected group of people.
Does it have to be a political office, the Chief Justice post?
Yeah, but you see, precisely because the government is a three-headed monster, and the judiciary is one of those arms, and the court decides very weighty issues touching on the spirit of the population, things that go the Constitutional Court touch on. We have seen things about culture, bride price, for instance. These are things where, if you are going to decide on something that is so attached to the people, you must have some sort of legitimacy. You must have some sort of legitimacy, democratic legitimacy. And the one way that the Constitution allows the judge to be able to claim legitimacy is by him saying, I was appointed
by someone you elected.
By someone you elected. So I get my democratic legitimacy tangentially. You elected the president appointed me on that basis of the Judicial Service Commission. So once you remove that, once you disconnect that, then you're in problems. So and it really goes back to the idea that the power in itself, given the president, you can say that here and there, but the power is not a strange power, but it goes back to the question of restraint. Who guards the guards? You have distributed this power. Who guards those who are given the duty to exercise this power? And for as long as you have a system where it seems to be a free-for-all, where the sense of that I'm serving my country, or I'm serving the nation, or that I'm bound by certain laws.
Yes.
If that sense is lacking, then because my sister Betty seems to suggest that this constitution somehow the president reads it in the morning. I fear that indeed he doesn't. There's a book by Chibita.
Maybe let's take a break at this moment. This is Spectrum on Radio. I want to go for a break. We'll be back. Just stay tuned.
Be the first to record from both the front and back camera at the same time. Be the first to listen to your photos. Be the first to print your albums from your phone directly. Be the first to control your phone by just waving your hand. Be the first to scroll using just your eyes. Be the first to own the Samsung Galaxy S4. Get your Samsung Galaxy S4 from Airtel and enjoy 15 GB data valid over 3 months, 24 months warranty, and ADH cover valid for 24 months. Dial *175*2# to activate your bundle. Be the first to own it, only from Airtel. The Governor Bank of Uganda invites the public to the 21st Joseph Mubiru Memorial Lecture on Friday, 2nd August 2013 at 2 p.m. at Kampala Serena International Conference Center. The guest speaker will be Honorable Trevor Manuel, one of South Africa's longest-serving finance ministers and now Minister for the Presidency in charge of the National Planning Commission. The session chair will be the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Honorable Maria Chwanuka. For more information, please visit www.bou.org.ug.
Officer, this time I'm going to throw away all my pangas and knives because you said they help in transmitting the banana bacterial wilt disease.
Take heart. If you flame them, you can still use them. The banana bacterial wilt is transmitted by insects such as the stingless bees that visit male birds to feed on sap that oozes out when the banana flower fall as the insects feed. They also bring in the bacteria that enter the banana plant through the wounds left behind when flowers fall. To stop the spread of insects, remove the male birds as soon as the last cluster is formed, whether you have the disease or not. Because removing the male bird using a pruning knife spreads the disease, use a fork stick.
This message is brought to you by National Agriculture Research Organization, NARO, together with National Agricultural Advisory Services, NADS.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Why have some lawyers protesting the proposed reappointment of Justice Odoki as the Chief Justice? Our guests tonight, Honorable Betty Kaya, President of the Uganda Federal Alliance, Mr. Bosinje Kabumba, lecturer at the Law School at Makerere University, and Mr. Frank Andiho, an NRM member and NRM party lawyer, sounding, well, a little bit, not the part. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Let's come back to you, Mr. Kanyo. I mean, you said things that could shock many people, not just here around the table. When we have Justice Odoki being appointed, some people think the president can reappoint someone to the Supreme Court, and to be a Chief Justice, have to come from the Supreme Court. He's putting two ladders together to get his height. What's wrong with that?
You see, the point I need us to appreciate is that not every NRM member puts the NRM trail through and through, and not every trail footed by the NRM is a good trail. So these are things we really must appreciate. As a people, we make mistakes. As a people, we stumble along the way. As a people, we are ill-advised. The point I am making is that the appointment of a Chief Justice is what is in issue. And the question you and I should ask is the present appointed Chief Justice, if he has been appointed anyway, because I don't know, I have just read in the Monitor, does he qualify for appointment? If he does not qualify for appointment, who is blameworthy for that appointment?
What's your view? Does he qualify?
Yes, he does not qualify. We have two people who qualify for appointment for the post of Chief Justice. Yeah. One of them is a serving member of the Supreme Court. The other one is an advocate who has practiced for not less than 20 years. If you're one of those, you qualify for appointment for Chief Justice.
So this man has been grafted.
Just once again. If you are already Chief Justice, your zenith of service is at 70 years. Now, once you clock the zenith, the Constitution humbly commands you to leave the stage. It only gives you a leeway of completion of the work menu before you within a period of 3 months. If you complete the work menu within a period of 3 months,
you go home.
You exit. The question is, the provision is you vacate.
You go and maybe read, so do something else.
What I read from the Monitor that I want to put in context is that the President appears to be writing to Judicial Service Commission in response to something that has already been drawn to his attention. He says, I have been notified by yourselves that we still can negotiate this road and make it Tumbarara. Now, my point of madness is with the Judicial Service Commission, that they picked the guts in the exercise of their professional calling to pen an opinion that the President can go around and appoint Justice Odoki. Actually, not Justice Odoki. By the way, for your information, Odoki is not a justice now.
What?
No, he is a retired Chief Justice.
Yes.
Full stop.
He's not a judge of the High.
He's never been a justice of the Supreme Court, because the Constitution says so. The composition of the Supreme Court is as follows: 1, the Chief Justice, Justices of the Supreme Court. So it is even wrong for anybody to refer to him as Justice Odoki. He is retired Chief Justice Odoki. So it is absolutely wrong, and I cannot be seen to be riding on anybody's back on this. It is absolutely wrong. It is a bad precedent for my practice. It is a scar in the development of our jurisprudence that a person like Odochi, whose history is rooted in the constitutional making process in this country, can even accept to be involved in a discussion. Forget about the appointment. That he can even accept to be involved in a discussion where his name features that he should be the principal defiler of this very constitution.
Principal defiler of the constitution.
I am telling you.
Justice Odoki. Those are very strong words.
Whose stewardship was in his hands and care. That he can participate and hold the bastion. It is grave. It is grave.
I think so. I also have a problem.
Honorable, do we have a shortage of replacements?
Of course we don't have a shortage of replacements.
Honorable Kame, my invitation to you is that let's first rally behind the cause of bashing Judicial Service Commission for abnegating its responsibility so far as they are required to advise the President.
I agree.
Because you see, I would forgive His Excellency the President for succumbing to your advice from me.
Yes.
You know, there's a precedent. There's a precedent to this. When Dr. Besigye had just come back from exile
From South Africa. They said he had raped a woman.
And he was arrested, and he was in Luzira. Justice Ogola, is it judge or justice? Justice.
No, retired judge.
Retired judge Ogola went to prison to ask Dr. Besigye to seek what do they call it? Amnesty.
Yes.
You know? And the case of Dr. Besigye was before
The competent court of law.
A competent court of law. And I think he was one of them.
Yes.
He was one of them.
Yes.
And he had and the man is saying, I am not guilty. I am innocent. And Justice Ogola knows that asking for amnesty is admission of guilt. So since then I have a serious problem with Justice Ogola. And I remember in his poetic way, he'll say from jailhouse to he called it to state house to jail. I think he was an emissary of President Museveni. Go and tell Besigye if he will seek amnesty, you know, he can go scot-free and all charges. You know, now for Justice Ogola to accept to go to Luzira, a judge before where Besigye is before, to ask him to seek amnesty, for me left a very sour taste in my mouth. Having said that, I agree with the council here and I'm really impressed, let me say, with your submission that Chief Justice Benjamin Odoki, who has been the chief custodian of the Constitution,
Even framer before.
framer of the Constitution and chief custodian of the Constitution, should really get involved in what my friend had said, raping, defiling the Constitution. I don't know why somebody, for that matter, even Aronda, how can so much controversy be around you and you are quiet, as if you don't have a view about this? And even Aronda said, only the president will tell me to resign from your army. What about your view? You are a freedom fighter. You are a member of parliament. What is your view? How do you feel about it? So I think we have serious problems, which brings me to the point of Council Kabomba here, who says the president has the prerogative, should be given enough power. We must have laws that solve Uganda's problems. Don't look elsewhere. What they did in Kenya, by the way, Council Kabomba, in Kenya, because of the problems of Kenya, they amended the constitution, and the president of Kenya no longer appoints the chief justice, the chairman of the the entire electoral commission,
Inspector General of Police,
and Inspector General of Police, and the governor of Bank of Kenya, because they are trying to solve Kenya's problems. If other people have their own problems, they will find ways of solving them. So if the problems, this man, what's his name, Raila Odinga, in 2007, they said, why don't you take your case to court? When Kibaki was
claimed he had raped him.
No, when he was anointed at night, I think swore in at night on a candlelight.
They flew in a judge very quickly
on a candlelight,
and they found a candle.
And Raila said, I cannot go to Kibaki's court. I cannot go before Kibaki's chief justice. So they amended the constitution and solved Kenya's problem. And Kenya now, the president does not appoint the chief justice, does not appoint the Inspector General of Police, does not appoint the Electoral Commission.
Yeah, I mean, they eventually got a chief justice wears an earring. Anyway, Mr. Kabomba, what is the procedure for appointing a chief justice?
The Constitution under Article 142 says the President may, on the advice of the Judicial Service Commission, appoint a Chief Justice. So,
Yes.
so the procedure is easy enough. But
do we know what the Judicial Service Commission told him?
It appears from reports that he was offered two names of one serving justice and another who is not there.
Yorokamba Mwene and Bat Katreva.
Yes, and he chose to But actually, the Judicial Service Commission did offer advice that was within the Constitution, because the JSC... Did they propose Justice Odoki? No, what they said was, if you want to have Justice Odoki, still, you can have him under Article 142, 142.2 says you can continue acting as a judge, a justice of Supreme Court.
Yes.
But the president then appears to have taken that advice and mutated it. So okay, fine, you talked about an acting justice of Supreme Court. Why not a whole chief justice? And so there's a real challenge there.
There's some engineering, if you like. Was that engineering without being unfair to the president?
Can I give you some piece of information?
Please do.
Please. You see, it is very strange that professional decency has lost a place in this country.
What do you mean?
Even under Article 142.2,
yes,
retired Chief Justice Benjamin Odoki cannot be appointed as a Supreme Court judge.
What do you mean?
Because this provision only refers to justices of the Supreme Court.
But he's been appointed justice of the Supreme Court.
Just one thing, let me tell you. It only refers to the reappointment of a justice of the Supreme Court. And he's not one. He's not a justice of the Supreme Court.
Well, you cannot reappoint someone who's already there. He had been retired, now he's being reappointed.
Yes, what I am saying is, can I read it to you?
Please do.
It says that where the office of a justice of the Supreme Court or justice of appeal or a judge of the High Court is vacant.
Yes.
In this case, you already know that Odochi is not one of these.
Yes.
He's not a justice of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
He's not a justice of the Court of Appeal. He's not a judge of the High Court. So A does not apply to him. Where that office falls vacant, B, a justice of the Supreme Court or justice of appeal or judge of the High Court is for any reason unable to perform the functions of his or her office. This does not apply to him as well. C, the Chief Justice advises Judicial Service Commission that the state of business in the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal or the High Court so requires. So even under C, there must be a sitting Chief Justice to advise Judicial Service Commission that the business of the courts requires that somebody else be brought on board. What is done? The President may, acting on the advice of Judicial Service Commission, appoint a person qualified for appointment as a Justice of the Supreme Court or a Justice of Appeal or a Judge of the High Court to act as such a Justice or Judge, even though that person has attained the age prescribed for retirement in respect of that office. What point am I making? The point I am making is that even the insurrection under Article 142.2 is not provided for a Chief Justice. It is provided for a Justice of the Supreme Court, a Justice of Appeal, or a Judge of the High Court. And none of them, in those brackets, Odochi does not fall in those brackets.
I begin to feel like a judge already. Let's hear from lawyer, counsel.
That was precisely the point I made. Although perhaps I made it less eloquently, but the point I was making was that, as Counsel Kandiwa has said, and what I exactly said, was that the Judicial Service Commission did point a way out, and that way out was under Article 142.2, under which former Chief Justice Odoki can be appointed as a Justice of the Supreme Court.
But it says it doesn't apply in any of the three.
No. Justice. He can be a Justice because you have to start from the point of, is there a vacancy of a Justice? Leave alone Chief Justice. Is there a vacancy of a Justice
of the Supreme Court?
Is there a vacancy of a Justice of the Supreme Court? Yes. Now, if there's a vacancy of the Justice of the Supreme Court, you go to 142.2, that one. So it says the President may appoint a person who is qualified to be a Justice
of the Supreme Court.
Yes. And now the question then becomes, is Odoki qualified to be a Justice of the Supreme Court? And where you turn to 143, and it says 143.1a, it says a person qualifies if they have practiced as an advocate for a period of less than 20 years or have worked as a Justice of the Supreme Court of Uganda. Now, Odoki is supremely qualified to be a Justice of the Supreme Court, and this is what the Judicial Service Commission pointed out. But now, the error on the part of His Excellency was then to take that and extrapolate it and say, well, if you can be a Justice, why not a full Chief Justice? That was the problem. I think that's where the error came.
Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. Why are some lawyers protesting the proposed reappointment of Justice Odoki as the Chief Justice? You can call in now. Our number is 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. And you call in, please tell us your name, where you're calling from, and switch off your radio if you can. Spectrum, hello.
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Yes, I'm called Robert, and I'm calling from Kale.
Go on, Robert.
Yes, I think what we haven't realized is President Museveni's dealings of making decent people look ridiculous in the eyes of the country. I think what Mr. Odoki should realize is he's being portrayed as this old man who is still very hungry for power, and is not good for his image which he has built over the years. Thank you very much.
Good point.
Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes, your name?
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, your name?
Yeah, I'm Martin Wandera.
Yes, Honorable Martin.
I would like to agree with the submissions of Kandiho and Kagumba that Justice Odoki cannot be reappointed as Chief Justice. And I would like him to save himself and the name he has built over these years by coming out and stating very clearly that he's not interested in this. The other thing which I would like to say is that whereas President Museveni has made all effort to roll back the constitutional gains we have made, he has been aided in this by the elected representatives of the people. If you look at Article 1052 had not been amended, some of the things we see today would not be happening. But President Museveni did it because elected leaders chose to ignore the history of the country and the reason why that provision had been put there. So just in conclusion, yes, the president has a problem, but Ugandans must elect leaders who are serious. Thank you.
Honorable Martin Wandera, former member of Parliament for Caucus. Spectrum, hello. Let's try to get the interpretation. Spectrum, hello.
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Hello?
Yes, sir, you're live on air. Your name?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Justice Odoki can be appointed to serve on a contract of 3 years.
Can you give us your name, sir?
Yes?
Yes?
This is Johnson.
Yes, Johnson.
Yeah, you read the constitution properly. Can serve on contract and it goes away after the contract.
Which article?
Well, we have the lawyers here to tell us. Spectrum, hello. Hello. Okay, let's get back to the studio. Council Kandiho, can this man be reappointed? You can respond to this question.
Thank you very much. See, let's put two things in proper perspective. There are two words used on this forum. Number one is reappointment, the other one is contract. For the tenure of office of Chief Justice, there is no such likelihood as reappointment. Why? It is a tenure that is dependent on unfettered service until you clock 70. Once a Chief Justice is appointed, no person has a right to block his tenure of service, save for the following: instability of body or mind. If a tribunal has been appointed and it says you are guilty of misconduct, or if you die. If the three do not exist, you serve your tenure until you clock 70, or until you opt out at 60, because there is a provision that you can opt out at 60, or you can resign. Now, the provision to do with your reappointment upon clocking 70 is not envisaged in the operation of this constitution. So, to begin with, Justice Odoki or any judge who is designated as Chief Justice cannot be reappointed in the position of Chief Justice upon clocking 70. What my learned colleague Kabumba says, which I agree with, is that at the tail end of the justice system, once you move out, the Judicial Service Commission can advise the appointing authority to give you a lease of life back to the bench as a justice of the Supreme Court. Now, that would mean that on the entire bench of the Supreme Court, Odochi would be at the tail end of the hierarchy of the Supreme Court, but would not be eligible for appointment as a Chief Justice.
Why specifically?
You see, the eligibility for appointment as Chief Justice is that you need not have clocked 70 because you already have served and moved.
But where's the 2-year contract coming from?
Now, let me tell you about the 2-year contract. The 2-year contract is imaginary. Because the job of a Chief Justice is not contractual. Who is the employer for the position of Chief Justice? The employer for the position of Chief Justice is the Republic of Uganda through the instrumentality of the President. The President appoints on the advice of Judicial Service Commission. It is not Judicial Service Commission that employs. It cannot even fire a judge. Later on, it cannot employ him. It cannot even discipline him. Judicial Service Commission cannot discipline a judge under the Constitution. Now, so who are they to give him a 2-year contract and supposedly coined as an extension of a 2-year contract? What are you extending? Can you purport to introduce a contract to amend a provision of the Constitution? No. So I am simply saying that in heaven's name, for civility's sake, if Justice Odoki has ears and he hears, he should quit quietly to save this country the great embarrassment that is about to befall us. The professional embarrassment that is going to befall him, before his children, before posterity. I am telling you. And on this we can't mince words.
The man has a very nice residence for Chief Justice.
No, I'd just like to
Why do you want him to
people
go
who
home?
called him, but particularly to respond to Honorable Wandera, with whom I agree on most of the things he talked about, except what I often hear people saying, Ugandans must or should elect leaders who are serious. How is a woman in Karamoja, who are the majority of voters anyway, supposed to know which of the 8 candidates who contested in 2011 who is most serious or who is best? That is why we must have a straight jacket in the office of the President, whether you are not serious or serious, because the Constitution says once you are 35 years old and under 75 and you have an O-level certificate and you have never been convicted of a crime or been called bankrupt, and you can stand. So you have 8 people who stood, maybe none of them is serious or good or has integrity, but they are the ones who have offered themselves. So are you going to cancel an election because you don't think people who offered themselves?
But you are voted by the EC. You are vetted by the EC.
On those 4 conditions, none of them about goodness or seriousness. So what we need is for us to prepare an environment in which they must serve us diligently, whether they are good or not.
So you're saying we could have a president with the dreadlocks and have Mr. Businje Kaumba. Talk to us about some of these things. Give us your own response. Yes. And I would like you to talk to us about Aronda Nyakairima as well. Yes. That was a very controversial one also.
And for me, it really goes back to the idea that, as Honorable Kamia said, you can have wonderful language, but even that language will be problematic in some respects. The first year LOCN will be told that language is an imperfect vehicle for expressing ideas. Best intentions, you put language, but there will always be 1 or 2 different ways of interpreting it. So for me then, the question goes to I cannot escape the word goodwill of those who are tasked with interpreting, implementing, or even making those laws. So without that idea of a culture really, so constitutionalism really, I'm talking about a culture whereby you know the different interpretations, but you deliberately choose. Unfortunately, in Uganda, we have a culture. There's the British sitcom called Yes, Prime Minister. Yes, Mr. Prime Minister. We seem to have a culture of Yes, Mr. President. That's why I'm really, and I should also say, very gladdened when I hear my brother Kandiho say, I'm a member of NRM, but here we shall disagree, but I don't become any less NRM because of disagreeing. If anything, you're better NRM if you can point out. Well, it
depends on who's judging, really. Some people have spoken the way he's spoken. We know what happened to them.
Yes.
Talk to us about Aronda Nyakairima. Should he be a minister? He was sworn in over the weekend. The president was there with 1 or 2 other people.
Aronda's dilemma can be that question can be just dealt with 2 articles. Article 117 of the Constitution and Article 2082 of the Constitution. 2082 says the UPDF shall be non-partisan. 117 says the cabinet shall have collective responsibility. Now, meaning that as a Minister of Internal Affairs, Aronda has to be collectively responsible for decisions, political decisions taken by the cabinet, and to defend those decisions in public, and to explain them to people, political decisions. You cannot really put 117 and 2082 on the same place. They're inconsistent.
Some people have said that since a soldier can be a minister, then the opposition, leader of opposition can appoint a general to be shadow minister for internal affairs.
It's wrong either way.
Well, technically speaking, it's possible. A minister can be sitting on one side of the bench, a soldier, so she can have another soldier opposing them.
But it really goes to the question that the constitution is really not restricted.
General Sejusa, shadow minister for internal affairs, facing off with another general, dressed in the uniform supplied by the same tailors. We have to go. Thank you very much indeed. Dear guest, Honorable Betty Kamya, President of the Uganda Federal Alliance Party, thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight. Mr. Businje Kabo, you wanted to say something before we go?
No, I did actually, except that
I don't want to disagree with Kabumba.
I only want to.
Yeah, say something about that.
I like the way I sometimes play about with words. You can hear his selective application of 117 you said and 208, but he cunningly omits 113.
We have to go. Thank you very much, dear guest, Honorable Betty Kamya, President of the Uganda Federal Alliance Party, Mr. Businje Kabumba, lecturer at the law school at Makerere University. Thank you for coming to Spectrum. And Mr. Frank Andiho, NRM member, also NRM party lawyer. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. So Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
The Governor Bank of Uganda invites Mubiru Memorial Lecture.